Did one famous cardinal request to be buried in the same grave as another man? Could two artists live and work together for over 50 years, becoming known to the world almost as a single entity? What happens when two literary brothers decide to share not just a home, but a single intimate diary for decades? Prepare to explore some of history's most intense and lasting bonds between men who never married. Number 8. The Pope of Pop and his quiet director, who lived a love story in plain sight. Andy Warhol, born Andrew Warhol on August 6, 1928, was a name that became synonymous with pop art. He was a painter, a filmmaker, a producer, and a publisher who transformed the art world from the 1960s until his death on February 22, 1987. Warhol never married. His life was a whirlwind of celebrity, art, and the iconic factory. His New York City studio. Amidst this public spectacle, a quieter, more personal story unfolded with Jed Johnson. Jed Johnson, born on July 30, 1948, first entered Warhol's orbit as a teenager. In 1967, at the age of 19, he was hired to sweep floors at the factory. It was a humble beginning. Johnson was different from many of the flamboyant personalities that populated Warhol's world. He was known for his calm demeanor, his intelligence, and his striking good looks. Soon, he was doing more than sweeping. He delivered a telegram to Warhol, and their connection began. Their romantic relationship started around 1968 and would last for 12 years, until 1980. During this significant period, Jed Johnson became an integral part of Warhol's life, both personally and professionally. He moved into Warhol's townhouse on East 66th Street. This was not just a casual living arrangement. It was a shared home, a domestic space away from the chaos of the factory. Johnson took on the task of decorating their home, creating a comfortable, antique-filled environment that contrasted with the silver industrial look of the factory. Johnson's influence extended into Warhol's professional world. He learned film editing and became a key collaborator. He edited many of Warhol's films, including Loves of Ondine, released in 1968, Flesh, released in 1968, Blue Movie, released in 1969, Trash, released in 1972. He also directed Andy Warhol's Bad in 1977, a film that Warhol produced. This professional partnership was deep. Johnson understood Warhol's aesthetic and contributed significantly to the final output of these iconic underground films. Their life together involved mundane routines mixed with Warhol's extraordinary social life. They had dachshunds, Archie and Amos, that they doted on. They would walk the dogs together. Johnson often accompanied Warhol to events, yet he generally remained in the background, a steady presence rather than a spotlight-seeking one. Warhol himself was famously reserved and shy in private, despite his public persona. Johnson provided a sense of stability and normalcy. The bond was evident to those within their close circle. Bob Colacello, editor of Warhol's Interview magazine, noted the domesticity of their relationship. Pat Hackett, who transcribed Warhol's diaries, documented numerous instances of their shared daily life conversations and occasional disagreements. Warhol's own diaries, published posthumously, offer glimpses into their connection, though often through Warhol's typically deadpan and observational style. For instance, Warhol would record Jed's activities, their meals, or comments Jed made. Their romantic relationship ended around 1980. The reasons were complex, as breakups often are. Warhol's increasing fame and the pressures of his world played a part. Johnson moved out of the townhouse. However, their connection did not entirely sever. Johnson went on to have a successful career as an interior designer, working for high-profile clients. He was respected for his taste and skill. Even after their romantic involvement ceased, a thread of connection remained. When Warhol was shot in 1968 by Valéry Solanas, Johnson was there helping him through his recovery. This was before their romantic relationship was fully established, but it shows the early trust. After their breakup, they maintained a level of contact. Jed Johnson, like Andy Warhol, never married. His life was tragically cut short. On July 17, 1996, Jed Johnson died at the age of 47 in the explosion of TWA Flight 800 off the coast of Long Island, New York. He was on his way to Paris. His death was a shock to many, including those from the Warhol era. The 12 years that Andy Warhol and Jed Johnson spent as partners represented a significant period of stability and creative output for Warhol. Johnson's influence, both as a companion and a collaborator, was substantial. He was not just another face in the factory crowd. He was the man Warhol went home to for over a decade. Their story is one of a deep personal bond that existed amidst one of the 20th century's most public and scrutinized artistic lives. The number of films Johnson edited for Warhol stands as a testament to their working synergy, with at least 5 major titles benefiting from his touch. The duration of their cohabitation, 12 years, is a significant number in any relationship. Number 7. The philosopher who found his logical inspiration on holiday with his best friend. Ludwig Wittgenstein, born on April 26, 1889 in Vienna, Austria-Hungary, was one of the most influential philosophers of the 20th century. His work impacted logic, the philosophy of mind, and the philosophy of language. He came from an immensely wealthy family, but he renounced his fortune. Wittgenstein never married and lived a life marked by intense intellectual pursuit and a somewhat ascetic personal style. He served in World War I, taught in remote Austrian villages, and held a professorship at Cambridge University. David Pinsent, born on May 24, 1891, was a British mathematics undergraduate at Trinity College, Cambridge, when he met Wittgenstein in 1912. Wittgenstein had arrived at Cambridge in 1911 to study logic under Bertrand Russell. Pinsent was described as bright, kind, and possessing a good sense of humor. He also never married. Their friendship quickly became exceptionally close. Wittgenstein, known for his demanding personality and intellectual intensity, found a compatible spirit in Pinsent. They were around the same age, Wittgenstein being just 2 years older. In the summer and autumn of 1912, they spent a significant amount of time together. One key documented period was a holiday they took to Iceland in September 1912. This trip was suggested and financed by Wittgenstein. It was just the two of them, exploring a remote and then largely unvisited landscape. Wittgenstein found the desolation inspiring. Pinsent kept a diary which provides valuable insights into this period and into Wittgenstein's character and early philosophical struggles. Their intellectual companionship was crucial for Wittgenstein. He was grappling with the ideas that would eventually form his groundbreaking work, Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus. Pinsent became a sounding board. While not a philosopher of Wittgenstein's caliber, Pinsent was intelligent and supportive. Wittgenstein dictated parts of his developing thoughts to Pinsent. In fact, some of Wittgenstein's earliest written philosophical notes from this period were dictated to Pinsent. Another significant journey they undertook together was to Norway in 1913. Wittgenstein was seeking solitude to work on his logic, and Pinsent accompanied him for several weeks, helping him find a place to live and work in Skolden. Pinsent's diary entries from this trip detail Wittgenstein's moods, his working habits, and their shared experiences in the remote Norwegian landscape. For example, on October 11, 1913, Pinsent wrote in his diary about Wittgenstein's intense concentration and his own role in providing companionship and practical assistance. Wittgenstein valued Pinsent's friendship immensely. He found Pinsent's presence calming and supportive during periods of intense intellectual labor and personal turmoil. Pinsent's diary notes that Wittgenstein could be difficult and demanding, but also brilliant and deeply affectionate towards him. Pinsent wrote of Wittgenstein's awful temper, but also of his genius and the unique nature of their bond. The outbreak of World War I in 1914 irrevocably changed their lives. Wittgenstein, though an Austrian citizen and thus an enemy alien in Britain, was allowed to leave. He enlisted in the Austro-Hungarian army. Pinsent joined the Royal Flying Corps as a pilot. They corresponded during the war, though irregularly due to the circumstances. Tragically, David Pinsent was killed in an airplane accident on May 8, 1918, while testing a new type of aircraft in Farnborough, England. He was only 26 years old. His death was a devastating blow to Wittgenstein. Wittgenstein was still serving in the army and was later taken as a prisoner of war. He learned of Pinsent's death much later. When Wittgenstein's Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus was finally published in 1921, it bore a dedication dedicated to the memory of my friend David H. Pinsent. This public acknowledgement proclaimed the profound importance Pinsent held for Wittgenstein. Tractatus is a seminal work, and to dedicate it to Pinsent speaks volumes about their connection. The number of years of their close friendship was relatively short, from 1912 to Pinsent's death in 1918, making it roughly 6 years, but its impact on Wittgenstein was lifelong. Pinsent's diary, which covers the period from May 1912 to October 1914, remains a crucial source for understanding Wittgenstein's early development. It details their travels, discussions, and Wittgenstein's often volatile emotional state. For instance, Pinsent records Wittgenstein talking about suicide, his struggles with his work, and his need for isolation, but also moments of shared laughter and adventure. The relationship between Ludwig Wittgenstein and David Pinsent was a friendship forged in the intense intellectual atmosphere of pre-war Cambridge and tested by Wittgenstein's unique personality. Pinsent provided vital support and companionship during a formative period of Wittgenstein's philosophical work. Wittgenstein's decision to dedicate his magnum opus to Pinsent, a young man who died before he could see its publication, is a lasting testament to the depth of their bond. Neither man ever married, and Pinsent's life was cut short before he had the chance, had he wished it. Wittgenstein lived until April 29, 1951, always remembering his friend. Number 6. The famous author and the sculptor whose fiery letters crossed the Atlantic for years. Henry James, born on April 15, 1843, in New York City, was a towering figure in transatlantic literature. He authored classic novels like The Portrait of a Lady, The Wings of the Dove, and The Turn of the Screw. James spent most of his adult life in Europe, eventually becoming a British citizen in 1915. He died on February 28, 1916. Henry James never married. His personal life has been the subject of much discussion, with his relationships often characterized by intense emotional connections, particularly with younger men. Hendrik Christian Andersen, born on April 17, 1872, in Bergen, Norway, was a sculptor, painter, and urban planner. His family emigrated to the United States when he was an infant, settling in Newport, Rhode Island. Andersen moved to Rome in the 1890s and lived there for most of his life. He, too, never married. He died on December 19, 1940. The two men met in Rome in 1899. James was 56 years old, an established literary master. Anderson was 27, a handsome and ambitious young sculptor. James was immediately captivated by Anderson. He was struck by Anderson's physical beauty and artistic aspirations. This meeting marked the beginning of a correspondence that would last for over 15 years, until shortly before James's death. More than 80 letters from James to Anderson survive, and they reveal a passionate, affectionate, and sometimes troubled relationship. James's letters to Anderson are notable for their effusive language and terms of endearment. He often addressed Anderson as "my dear, dear Hendrik," or "my dearest boy." He praised Anderson's physical appearance, calling him gloriously beautiful and magnificently statuesque. For instance, in a letter dated February 9, 1902, James wrote, "I hold you, my dear boy, in the very tenderest revolution of my old affection." And on April 28, 1902, "the sense that I can't help you, see you, talk to you, touch you, hold you close and long, or do anything to make you rest on me, and feel my deep participation, this torments me, racks me." Beyond the affectionate language, James offered Anderson extensive advice, both artistic and personal. He encouraged Anderson's work, but was also critical of its grandiosity. Anderson dreamed of creating a vast world city, a utopian center of arts, science, and international governance filled with his colossal sculptures. James, a master of psychological realism and nuanced observation, found Anderson's monumental ambitions somewhat misguided and impractical. He urged Anderson to focus on smaller, more achievable works. In a letter from April 14, 1912, James gently tried to steer Anderson's away from his grandiose schemes. "Your production is prodigious, and the quality of it, the beauty and the force, of a sublime order. But the erection, my dear boy, is another matter." Despite his artistic reservations, James's emotional investment in Anderson was profound. He invited Anderson to visit him at his home, Lamb House, in Rye, England. Anderson did visit on a few occasions. These visits were clearly important to James. He expressed great joy in Anderson's presence and deep sorrow at his departures. In a letter after one such visit in 1904, James wrote, "I have missed you, out of all proportion to the too few hours you were here." The physical distance between them, James in England, Anderson in Rome, meant their relationship was largely epistolary. The letters bridge this gap, filled with James's longing and concern for Anderson's well-being and success. The number of surviving letters from James, over 80, indicates a regular and sustained correspondence over many years. Anderson's letters to James are fewer in number or less preserved, but the dialogue was clearly two-sided. Anderson, for his part, seems to have valued James's mentorship and affection, though he continued to pursue his own artistic vision with unwavering determination. He sent James photographs of himself and his sculptures, which James acknowledged with great enthusiasm. The physical separation was a recurring theme of lament in James's letters. Their bond was one of intense emotional connection. James clearly experienced strong feelings for Anderson, and his letters are some of the most overtly affectionate he ever wrote. The nature of their physical relationship, if any, remains undocumented and a subject of speculation. However, the emotional intimacy conveyed in the letters is undeniable. The friendship, or perhaps more accurately, the intense attachment, lasted until James's final years. Even as James's health declined, he continued to write to Anderson. The age difference of 29 years was significant, with James often taking on a paternal or meriting role, albeit one suffused with romantic admiration. Henry James and Hendrik Andersen both remained bachelors their entire lives. Andersen continued to work on his World City project until his death, though it was never realized. His home in Rome, the Villa Helene, is now the Museo Hendrik Christian Andersen, shooting his sculptures and plans. James's legacy as a novelist and critic is immense. Their correspondence offers a unique window into James's private emotional world and reveals a passionate attachment that transcended continents and artistic differences, a bond between two lifelong bachelors separated by age and distance but connected by a deep and complex affection. Number 5. The universal genius and his loyal apprentice, who inherited a world of secrets. Leonardo da Vinci, born on April 15, 1452, in Anciano, Tuscany, now Italy, was the archetypal Renaissance man. His genius spanned painting, sculpting, architecture, music, science, mathematics, engineering, invention, anatomy, geology, cartography, botany, writing, and history. He painted the Mona Lisa and The Last Supper, iconic works that continue to mesmerize millions. Leonardo never married and had no known children. He died on May 2, 1519, in Amboise, France. Throughout his life, Leonardo surrounded himself with young male pupils and companions. Two of the most significant were Gian Giacomo Caprotti da Orino, known as Salai, and Francesco Melzi, while Salai was a companion for around 30 years, entering Leonardo's household at age 10 in 1490. It was Francesco Melzi who became Leonardo's principal assistant, companion, and heir in his later years. Francesco Melzi, born around 1491 into a noble Milanese family, joined Leonardo's household around 1506 or 1507. He was about 15 years old at the time, while Leonardo was in his mid-50s. Melzi was handsome, well-educated, and possessed a gentle and loyal disposition which contrasted with the more tempestuous Salai, whom Leonardo had nicknamed Little Devil. Melzi quickly became Leonardo's favored pupil and closest companion. Their relationship was multifaceted. Melzi was Leonardo's student in painting, and under Leonardo's guidance, he became a talented artist in his own right. Several paintings attributed to Melzi, such as Vertumnus and Pomona and Flora, show a strong Leonardesque style. Melzi was more than just a student. He was Leonardo's secretary, managing his notebooks and papers, and his devoted attendant, caring for him especially as Leonardo aged and suffered from hellacis of his right hand around 1517. Leonardo's affection for Melzi was evident. Unlike Salai, whom Leonardo often chided in his notebooks for misbehavior, Melzi was treated with consistent kindness and trust. When Leonardo moved to Rome in 1513 and then to France in 1516 under the patronage of King Francis I, Melzi accompanied him. Salai also traveled to France but did not remain permanently with Leonardo in his final years, in the same way Melzi did. The 3 years Leonardo spent in France, from late 1516 until his death in 1519, were shared closely with Melzi at the Château du Clos-Luce, near the king's residence. During this time, Leonardo organized his vast collection of notes on science, anatomy, and art. Melzi was instrumental in this process. It is largely thanks to Melzi's efforts after Leonardo's death that so much of this material survived. In Leonardo's last will and testament, dated April 23, 1519, just days before his death, Francesco Melzi was named the principal heir and executor. Leonardo bequeathed to Melzi all his manuscripts, notebooks, drawings, scientific instruments, and personal effects. This was an immense inheritance, not in monetary terms, but in terms of cultural and intellectual wealth. The famous notebooks, containing tens of thousands of pages of Leonardo's thoughts and sketches, were entrusted to Melzi's care. Leonardo referred to Melzi in his will with terms of affection, acknowledging his loyal service. For example, the will specified that Melzi would inherit each and all of the books the testator presently owns and other instruments and pertains of his art and his profession as a painter. After Leonardo's death, on May 2, 1519, Melzi returned to his family villa in Vaprio de Adda, near Milan, carrying Leonardo's precious legacy. He dedicated himself to preserving and organizing Leonardo's papers. He meticulously catalogued the notebooks and attempted to prepare some of them for publication. Most notably, the treatise on painting. It was Melzi who assembled Leonardo's notes into the form we know today, binding loose sheets into codices. This task took many years. Francesco Melzi lived for about 50 more years after Leonardo's death, dying around 1570. He did eventually marry, but this was relatively late in his life, long after Leonardo had passed away, and after he had fulfilled his duties as Leonardo's intellectual heir. His primary adult years of association with Leonardo were as a bachelor companion and apprentice. The bond between Leonardo and Melzi was one of deep mutual respect, affection, and intellectual collaboration. Melzi's devotion ensured that Leonardo's extraordinary mind, captured in thousands of pages, would not be lost to posterity. The number of years they spent together, approximately 13 from around 1506 to 1519, were crucial for the preservation of Leonardo's legacy. Melzi's inheritance wasn't just items, it was the responsibility for the artistic and scientific soul of a genius. Number 4. The gossipy nobleman and the shy poet, whose friendship survived a grand tour disaster. Horace Walpole, born on September 24, 1717, was the son of British Prime Minister Sir Robert Walpole. He was an art historian, writer, and Whig politician. He is famous for his Gothic novel, The Castle of Otranto, for building Strawberry Hill House, a fantasy Gothic villa, and for his voluminous correspondence, which provides a vivid social and political history of his time. Walpole never married and died on March 2, 1797. Thomas Gray, born on December 26, 1716, was a poet, classical scholar, and professor at Cambridge University. He is best known for his Elegy, written in a country churchyard, one of the most popular and frequently quoted poems in the English language. Gray also never married and lived a reclusive, scholarly life. He died on July 30, 1771. Walpole and Gray met as schoolboys at Eton College around the 1720s. They were part of a close-knit group of friends known as the Quadruple Alliance, which also included Richard West and Thomas Ashton. This early bond was formative for both. Walpole was outgoing and sociable, while Gray was more reserved and studious. Their friendship continued when they both attended Cambridge University, Walpole at King's College and Gray at Peterhouse. After university, from 1739 to 1741, Walpole invited Gray to accompany him on a grand tour of Europe, a journey typically undertaken by young gentlemen of means to complete their education. Walpole's father financed the tour. This 2-year journey through France and Italy should have cemented their friendship, but it famously ended in a bitter quarrel. The exact cause of their falling out in 1741 in Reggio, Italy is not entirely clear, as both were reticent about the details. It seems to have stemmed from differences in temperament and expectations. Walpole, the wealthy aristocrat, was interested in high society parties and collecting art. Gray, the serious scholar, was more focused on ancient ruins, libraries, and classical studies. Tensions grew, and Gray left Walpole to return to England alone. This rupture lasted for several years. Despite this dramatic break, Their connection was too deep to be permanently severed. They were reconciled in November 1745 through the efforts of a mutual acquaintance. Their renewed friendship, however, was different. It was more cautious, perhaps, but it endured until Gray's death. They corresponded regularly, though Gray was often a reluctant letter writer. Walpole became a great champion of Gray's poetry. It was Walpole who was instrumental in the first publication of Gray's Elegy Written in a Country Churchyard. In 1751, Gray had circulated the poem in manuscript form. When a magazine editor obtained a copy and informed Gray of his intention to publish it, Gray was alarmed, turned to Walpole for help. Walpole arranged for a swift, authorized edition to be printed by his friend William Strahan, ensuring Gray's work appeared in a form he approved. This edition came out on February 15, 1751, just days before the magazine's unauthorized version. Walpole also established a private press at Strawberry Hill, the Strawberry Hill Press. One of its early and most prestigious publications was Odes by Mr. Gray in 1757, which included The Progress of Poesy and The Bard. This beautifully produced volume helped to solidify Gray's reputation as a leading poet of his day. Walpole's admiration for Gray's genius was immense, though Gray himself was often plagued by self-doubt and a reluctance to publish. Their correspondence reveals the complexities of their relationship. Walpole's letters are witty, gossipy, and full of news. Gray's are more scholarly and reserved, but also show warmth and a dry humor. They shared literary interests, discussed books, and commented on contemporary events. Walpole often teased Gray about his reclusive habits and his small poetic output, urging him to write more. When Gray died in 1771, at the age of 54, Walpole was deeply affected. He became Gray's literary executor, along with William Mason. Walpole oversaw the publication of Mason's Memoirs of the Life and Writings of Mr. Gray in 1775, which included many of Gray's letters. Walpole also cherished Gray's memory, collecting his books and manuscripts. The friendship between Horace Walpole and Thomas Gray spanned nearly 40 years from their school days until Gray's death, minus the approximately 4-year interruption. Despite their different personalities and the famous quarrel, they maintained a significant bond. Both men navigated their lives as bachelors in a society where marriage was the norm for their class. Their enduring connection, fueled by shared memories, mutual respect for each other's talents, and a deep if sometimes tested affection, stands as a notable literary friendship. The grand tour lasted 2 years, a significant shared experience that, despite its difficult end, formed part of their story. Walpole outlived Gray by 26 years, always upholding his friend's literary legacy. Number 3. The brothers who lived as one mind, sharing a home, a diary, and a single literary path. Edmond de Goncourt, born on May 26, 1822, and Jules de Goncourt, born on December 17, 1830, were inseparable French writers who made significant contributions to naturalist literature and art criticism. They were more than just brothers. They were collaborators in life and art, sharing a unique and intensely close bond. Neither Edmond nor Jules ever married. They lived together their entire adult lives until Jules' premature death. The brothers came from an aristocratic family that had lost much of its wealth. After their mother's death in 1848, when Edmond was 26 and Jules was 18, they inherited a modest income that allowed them to pursue a life dedicated to art and literature without needing to work conventional jobs. They made a conscious decision to live and work together, forging a singular literary identity. Their collaboration was so complete that it is often difficult to distinguish their individual contributions to their joint works. They co-authored numerous novels, historical studies, and art criticism. Their most famous novel, Germanie Lacertu, published in 1865, was a groundbreaking work of realism based on the secret double life of their own housemaid, Rose Malengry. Other notable works include Manette Salomon from 1867 and Madame Gervais Say from 1869. They were meticulous researchers, delving into historical archives and observing contemporary life with a keen eye for detail. Perhaps the most intimate record of their shared existence is the Journal des Goncourt, their monumental diary, which they began in 1851. This diary, kept for decades, chronicles their daily lives, their literary efforts, their social interactions with prominent figures like Flaubert, Zola, and Victor Hugo, and their candid, often biting observations on Parisian society and culture. Initially, Jules was the primary scribe, but after his death, Edmond continued it alone. The journal is a rich historical document, offering unparalleled insight into the literary and artistic world of 19th century France. The sheer volume of the journal is staggering, eventually published in 9 volumes, covering the period up to Jules' death, and then continued by Edmond. The Goncourts lived together in a series of apartments in Paris, eventually settling in a house in Auteuil, which they filled with 18th century art and objets d'art. They were passionate collectors, particularly of French Rococo art and Japanese art, and their taste influenced contemporary aesthetics. Their home was a carefully curated reflection of their shared artistic sensibilities. They shared meals, work, and social life. Their routines were intertwined. Their bond was exceptionally intense. They described themselves as 2 bodies with 1 mind. They often dressed alike. Contemporaries noted their almost symbiotic relationship. They were rarely seen apart. This profound closeness was both a source of strength for their work and a defining characteristic of their personal lives. Partnership was tragically cut short when Jules de Goncourt died on June 20, 1870, at the age of 39, from the devastating effects of syphilis. His illness was prolonged and agonizing, and Edmond nursed him with unwavering devotion. Jules' death was an immense blow to Edmond. He described his grief in the journal with raw pain, writing entries like, "My brother, my friend, my companion, my all." After Jules' death, Edmond lived for another 26 years, dying on July 16, 1896. Continued to write, publishing novels under his own name, and tirelessly working to promote their joint legacy. He also faithfully continued the Journal des Goncourt, which became a poignant record of his solitary existence and his enduring communion with his lost brother. He dedicated himself to establishing the Académie Goncourt, a literary society funded by his estate, which annually awards the prestigious Prix Goncourt for a work of French literature. This was a fulfillment of a shared dream he had with Jules. The Académie was officially founded in 1900 and awarded its first prize in 1903. The lives of Edmond and Jules de Goncourt represent an extraordinary example of sibling devotion and clever genius. For nearly 20 years, from 1851 until 1870, they lived and worked as an almost singular entity, producing a significant body of literature and art criticism. Their shared bachelorhood was not incidental but central to their way of life and their artistic production. The journal, their most personal and perhaps most lasting work, is a testament to a bond so profound that even death could not entirely sever it, as Edmond continued to converse with Jules to its pages for another quarter of the century. The number of years they actively collaborated was approximately 19 years. Edmond ensured their shared name would live on in French letters for centuries through the Académie Goncourt. Number 2. The 2 artists who built a shared life and home so famous they were just the Bachelors. Charles Ricketts, born on October 2nd, 1866, in Geneva, and Charles Shannon, born on April 26, 1863, in Sleaford, Lincolnshire, were British artists and partners in life and art for over 50 years. They were painters, illustrators, typographers, sculptors, costume and set designers, and influential collectors. Their collaboration and domestic partnership were so well known that they were often referred to simply as the Ricketts and Shannon, or the Bachelors. Neither man ever married. They met in 1882 at the City and Guilds Technical Art School in Lambeth, London. Ricketts was 16 and Shannon was 19. They quickly formed a close bond, drawn together by their shared artistic interests and ambitions. From around 1888, they began living together, a domestic arrangement that would last until Ricketts's death in 1931. Their partnership was remarkable for its duration and its seamless integration of personal and professional life. Their artistic collaboration was extensive. Together, they launched the Vale Press in 1896, a private press dedicated to producing beautifully designed and illustrated books in the tradition of William Morris's Kelmscott Press. Ricketts was the primary designer and illustrator for the Vale Press, creating elegant typefaces, intricate borders, and striking woodcut illustrations. Shannon, a talented lithographer and painter, also contributed. The Vale Press produced over 80 books, including editions of Shakespeare and Romantic poets, before it closed in 1904 after a fire destroyed its unique typefaces. Beyond the Vale Press, they pursued individual artistic careers while constantly supporting and influencing each other. Ricketts was known for his dramatic, often jewel-toned paintings with mythological or biblical themes, and later in his career for his innovative stage and costume designs for plays by authors like Oscar Wilde, George Bernard Shaw, and W.B. Yeats. He designed over 50 productions. Shannon was celebrated for his sensitive portraits, idyllic figure compositions, and masterful lithographs. His style was softer and more romantic than Ricketts's. They lived in a series of shared homes in London, including the Vale in Chelsea, which became a vibrant artistic and literary salon. Their homes were famously filled with their extensive art collections, which included old master paintings, Greek and Egyptian antiquities, Japanese prints, and Persian pottery. They were connoisseurs with an exceptional eye, and their collections were renowned. Oscar Wilde was a close friend, particularly of Ricketts, and a frequent visitor. Ricketts designed the cover for Wilde's A House of Pomegranates in 1891, and later, after Wilde's imprisonment, remained a loyal supporter. Their life together was one of shared passions, intellectual exchange, and deep mutual devotion. They were inseparable companions. Contemporaries observed their close bond with admiration and respect. Their partnership was an open secret in the art world, accepted and celebrated. They hosted dinner parties, traveled together, and worked side by side. Their circle included many of the leading artists and writers of the day. Ricketts was often seen as the more dominant and articulate personality, while Shannon was quieter and more introspective. However, their partnership was one of equals, with each contributing their unique talents and perspectives. They referred to each other in their diaries and letters with affection. Ricketts's diaries, published posthumously, provide insights into their shared life and his deep love for Shannon. In 1928, Shannon suffered a serious fall while hanging a picture. He sustained severe brain damage and never fully recovered, remaining an invalid for the rest of his life. Ricketts cared for him devotedly for the next 3 years, until Ricketts himself died suddenly from heart failure on October 7, 1931, at the age of 65. Ricketts's death was a profound shock to Shannon, who was left in a diminished mental state. After Ricketts's death, Shannon lived on until March 18, 1937, cared for by friends and his sister. In his will, Ricketts had bequeathed his share of their joint art collection to public galleries, primarily the Fitzwilliam Museum in Cambridge, with the condition that Shannon could enjoy it for his lifetime. The Ricketts and Shannon collection at the Fitzwilliam is a testament to their shared taste and connoisseurship. The partnership of Charles Ricketts and Charles Shannon lasted for nearly half a century. Their lives were a testament to a deeply committed personal and artistic union. They built a shared world of art, beauty, and intellectual endeavor, leaving a lasting legacy through their own work and their remarkable collection. The number of years they lived together, from roughly 1888 to 1931, is over 40 years. The number of books produced by their Vale Press, over 80, shows their prolific collaboration in just one field. They truly were the bachelors who shared a single art-filled life. Number 1. The cardinal who wished to be buried in the same grave as his beloved priest friend. John Henry Newman, born on February 21, 1801 in London, was one of the most prominent and controversial religious figures of the 19th century. An Anglican priest and a leader of the Oxford movement, he converted to Roman Catholicism in 1845, a decision that sent shockwaves through Victorian England. He was later made a cardinal in 1879 and was canonized as a saint in the Catholic Church in 2019. Newman never married, embracing a life of celibacy as an Anglican and later as a Catholic priest. He died on August 11, 1890. Ambrose St. John, born on June 29, 1815 in Hornsey, Middlesex, was also initially an Anglican clergyman. He was younger than Newman by 14 years. Like Newman, he was involved in the Oxford movement, which sought to reintroduce older Christian traditions into the Church of England. St. John followed Newman into the Roman Catholic Church in 1845, just a few months after Newman's own conversion. He, too, lived a celibate life as a priest. He died on May 24, 1875. Their paths crossed at Oxford in the early 1840s. St. John became one of Newman's devoted disciples. After their conversions, they traveled to Rome together to study for the Catholic priesthood. They were ordained priests on the same day, June 9, 1847. Upon returning to England, Newman founded the Birmingham Oratory in 1848, a community of priests living under a common rule, and Ambrose St. John was one of its founding members. He would remain by Newman's side for the rest of his life. Their relationship was one of profound personal and professional intimacy. St. John became Newman's closest friend, confidant, secretary, and tireless assistant. He lived with Newman in the Oratory House in Edgbaston, Birmingham, for nearly 3 decades. He supported Newman through numerous trials and controversies, including the Achille libel trial in 1851–1853, a deeply stressful period for Newman. St. John was a gifted linguist and classical scholar, and he assisted Newman with translations and literary work. He also nursed Newman through illnesses. Newman's affection and reliance on St. John were immense. He described St. John as his earthly aid and comfort. In his letters and journals, Newman frequently spoke of St. John's loyalty, gentleness, and unwavering support. Their bond was evident to all who knew them. They shared a deep spiritual connection, intellectual companionship, and a common life dedicated to their religious calling. The intensity of Newman's feelings for St. John is most strikingly revealed in his wishes regarding their burial. Ambrose St. John died relatively young, at the age of 59 in 1875, after a short illness, likely from overwork related to translating a complex German theological work for Newman. Newman was devastated by St. John's death. He wrote in his diary on May 26, 1875, "I have ever thought that no trial could be so great as the death of Ambrose St. John. It is the greatest affliction I have had in my life." He officiated at St. John's funeral and preached a moving sermon. Years later, Newman made explicit instructions for his own burial. He directed that he be buried in the same grave as Ambrose St. John. In a memorandum dated February 20th, 1889, Newman wrote, "I wish with all my heart to be buried in friend Ambrose St. John's grave, and I give this as my last, my imperative will." He further specified the inscription for their shared memorial stone, "Ex umbri et imaginibus in veritatem," meaning out of shadows and phantoms into the truth, a motto deeply significant to Newman. Below their names and dates, he wanted the Latin phrase, cor ad cor, loquetur, meaning heart speaks to heart, which was his cardinal motto. When Newman died on August 11th, 1890, at the age of 89, his wishes were carried out. He was buried in the grave of Ambrose St. John in the cemetery of the Oratorian Retreat House at Rednal, near Birmingham. They lay together for over a century. The shared grave and the inscription became a testament to their extraordinary bond. The number of years they lived and worked closely together at the Birmingham Oratory was approximately 27 years, from 1848 until St. John's death in 1875. Newman outlived St. John by 15 years, cherishing his memory throughout. The depth of their friendship has been discussed by biographers and theologians. Newman himself wrote shortly after St. John's death, "I have always thought that no bereavement was equal to that of a husband or a wife, but I feel it difficult to believe that any can be greater, or any wife's sorrow greater, than mine." This statement from a celibate priest who became a cardinal and a saint highlights the profound nature of the love and companionship he shared with Ambrose St. John. Their story is one of a spiritual and personal partnership that transcended conventional categories, a lifelong devotion between two men who chose a celibate path but found in each other a love that Newman wished to commemorate even in death. The fact that Newman, a figure of such immense religious stature, made this imperative will speaks volumes about the significance of Ambrose St. John in his life.